Meet these new missiles that frighten the US. After a long hiatus, hypersonic missile research and development is back in full swing. Major powers, such as Russia, China, and the US have been racing to develop hypersonic missile, a missile system so fast that it cannot be intercepted by any current missile defense system. Hypersonic missiles will play a huge role in foreign policy in the years to come, as core pillars of geopolitics, such as geography and technological power, can be undermined by hypersonic missiles. And, given a recent uptick in successful tests from the likes of China and Russia, hypersonic missiles are much closer than we think, forcing a global reassessment of traditional notions of deterrence. A hypersonic speed is one that exceeds 5 times the speed of sound, often stated as starting at speeds of Mach 5 and above. The precise Mach number at which a craft can be said to be flying at hypersonic speed varies, since individual physical changes in the airflow, like molecular dissociation and ionization, occur at different speeds. These effects collectively become important around Mach 5 to 10. The hypersonic regime can also be alternatively defined as speeds where specific heat capacity changes with the temperature of the flow as kinetic energy of the moving object is converted into heat. China's most recent successful test of a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile has shaken American military officials and politicians, putting a fresh focus on America's own hypersonic programs, which appear at least publicly to lag those in Russia and China. Nuclear game changer. The nascent hypersonic arms race is no secret. The world's top military powers have been working for years to fine-tune the futuristic weapons. Hypersonic missiles fly faster at Mach 5 times the speed of sound, and at a lower trajectory than ballistic missiles, and can maneuver in flight. This all makes it more difficult for existing defense networks to intercept them. Russian President Vladimir Putin famously boasted in 2018 that one of his new hypersonic missiles would be practically invulnerable to American and NATO interceptors. Russia and China have already deployed hypersonic weapons, while the US has not. China deployed its first hypersonic missile, the nuclear-capable medium-range DF-17 glide vehicle, in 2019. Russia also deployed its first nuclear-capable Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle in 2019. The US has 2 ongoing hypersonic projects, one run by the Army and the other by the Navy. Last year, a joint Army-Navy test saw a hypersonic missile land within 6 inches of its target, according to the Pentagon. Deployed Russian and Chinese weapons plus China's round-the-world latest test mean tough questions for the US military-industrial establishment. Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby said in October that US hypersonic weapon progress is real, it's tangible, and we are absolutely working toward being able to develop that capability. He declined to share specifics with reporters. With a budget more than that of Russia and China combined, though observers suggest that Moscow and Beijing conceal some defense spending, some are asking why the Pentagon is lagging on hypersonics. Hypersonic weapons is certainly an area where we need to accelerate and intensify our efforts, Inhofe told Newsweek. Former President Donald Trump's final defense budget for the fiscal year 2021 requested $3.2 billion for all hypersonics-related research. President Joe Biden's 2022 fiscal year budget is requesting $3.8 billion, an almost 20% increase. Lawmakers will still push for more. King told Newsweek, "I will continue pressing administration and military officials to give this matter the attention and resources required to defend our nation." Progressives have long railed against the bloated Pentagon budget, swollen by decades of sprawling, primarily counterinsurgency foreign interventions. The Pentagon is now pivoting to a new era of strategic competition, i.e., great power competition with China, and less so Russia, and must assess its priorities and processes. The Pentagon's resource allocation and planning are hampered by bureaucracy and politics, Banks said. There's a lot we can change. The hypersonic debate will certainly undermine progressive efforts to trim the military budget. We can only achieve peace through strength, and it is inconceivable that we would underinvest in our military at a time when Russia and China are testing our resolve, Wilson said. A Republican national security staffer, who did not wish to be named, told Newsweek that Pentagon leaders have got to get themselves into a headspace where they can shed everything that's superfluous and unnecessary. Every spending line item like that doesn't directly contribute to the realities of 21st century warfare. They have to get rid of whatever that thing is, the staffer said. The department writ large is in widespread need of reform that focuses it intellectually, physically, technologically, etc., on the fight ahead. Spending alone won't solve the problem. It's got to be smart spending, the staffer said. And there has to be cultural reforms in the Defense Department that match any increases in the defense budget. Arms control standoff. China is not constrained by any strategic arms control agreements. The US and Russia signed several such agreements during the Cold War, though several have since collapsed or lapsed. Earlier this year, and days before its expiry, Biden approved a 5-year extension of the 2010 New START Treaty, which capped US and Russian strategic nuclear arsenals at 1,550 deployed warheads and 700 deployed missiles and heavy bombers each. But Biden's administration, like Trump's before it, has stressed that China must be brought into the strategic arms control fold. Beijing has so far refused. Last year, Fu Song, the head of the Chinese Foreign Ministry's Arms Control Department, told a press conference in Beijing, "I can assure you that if the US says that they are ready to come down to the Chinese level of nuclear weapons, China will be happy to participate the next day." But actually, we know that's not going to happen. House Armed Services Committee Ranking Member Republic Mike Rogers, RAL, told Newsweek it seems clear that Chinese obstinacy on arms control violates its United Nations Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons Treaty commitments. Article 6 of that treaty commits signatories to pursue negotiations in good faith on effective measures relating to cessation of the nuclear arms race at an early date and to nuclear disarmament. Arms control would have broad bipartisan support, but must include Beijing. The GOP national security staffer said, "You're just not going to get an arms control treaty passed in the Senate in 2026 that doesn't constrain the Chinese as well. Without looping in the Chinese, there's no point. We don't live in the Cold War anymore. Bilateral arms control treaties are dead." The details of any future agreements could divide Congress, particularly if the US agreed to reduce its own arsenal or stunt its own research. Inhofe told Newsweek, "I would welcome conversations to reduce tensions, but such conversations should not be based solely on US concessions. We need to see serious changes to Putin's and Xi's provocative behavior, and I'm skeptical that would happen anytime soon. Our nuclear forces are our greatest deterrent. We have seen time and time again that it's naive to believe that if we simply abandon our deterrent, others will follow. Concessions in this regard would have little to no impact in limiting China and Russia's military ambitions or policies, but would significantly undermine our allies' confidence in the United States and our security guarantees, and make us less safe." Banks, too, cautioned against any US concessions. The Biden administration must strengthen our capacity to counter Chinese aggression and establish credible US deterrence, not just by expanding hypersonic missile research, but also by working more closely with our allies, he said. The Biden administration is currently preparing its nuclear posture review. The document will be telling in how the White House intends to approach arms control vis-a-vis Beijing. "I strongly caution the Biden administration against negotiating away American peace through strength in their upcoming nuclear posture review, and oppose any hypersonics arms agreements until China becomes a more constructive international partner," Wilson said. America's defense strategy, too, has to tread a fine line. The network must be capable of defeating strikes from smaller adversaries like Iran and North Korea, but not so capable to spark an arms race with Russia and China. If America is too secure, it could upset the mutually assured destruction (MAD) concept that has arguably prevented devastating nuclear conflict. Former President Ronald Reagan's controversial and ultimately abandoned strategic defense initiative nicknamed Star Wars is one example of how improved defense can destabilize MAD. Rogers told Newsweek that Chinese and Russian advances cannot be justified by America's current network of ground-based interceptors. The notion that the 44 ground-based interceptors that the US fields to protect the homeland for North Korea forced Russia and China's hand in this regard is hot garbage, Rogers said. Newsweek has contacted the White House for comment on the US-China nuclear balance and any plans for future arms control outreach. Hypersonics, the new normal? Smaller nations are closely watching the big three as they push ahead. Nations including India, the UK, Israel, South Korea, Australia, and Japan are already working on their own hypersonic applications. American adversaries like Iran and North Korea will no doubt have similar plans.